I appreciate very much the opportunity. Here, taking care of some things to do with art, and I also had a meal with Dorothy Nelson that had been looking forward to. She's doing well, 95, amazingly. She's still a judge.
Yeah.
But she's called a senior judge, which means she said she can join in cases that interest her and that she wants to contribute to it, but she's not obliged to do anything in particular. So that's very, from the public point of view, that's the most distinguished Baha'i you have in this area, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Appointments by the president to this court, regional court, that oversees all the other courts. And so was all excited about some resume of the teachings that she has that break down some of the passages that help you to understand the faith better, and that are from Shoghi Effendi. And I've been trying to develop these little booklets. She says she's determined to get them published somehow, but they're just the words of the Guardian, but they're broken down into bullet points. When a sentence is half a page long and it has various phrases, there's a bullet point for each one. Mm-hmm. Which suggests to us, I think, as we read it, that I should be noticing each one of these, because it's so easy to read through and come to difficult words and move on, and you kind of don't absorb the whole thing. The foreword to God Passes By, the statement that Shoghi Effendi wrote in 1947, resume of Baha'i teachings for the United Nations committee that was considering the future of the Holy Land, are overviews of the faith which give you a kind of concise and very accurate, dynamic vision of what it is. And absorbing that becomes increasingly hopeful, increasingly settled in your faith, you know? We all know what the faith is. We ask. Another of the booklets has the quotations that Shoghi Effendi collected under the rubric Essential Verities of the Faith, which he says everyone should uphold and learn and think about. And then he gives 47 quotations, and you would say, well, what are they? Well, surely they must be about unity of mankind and unity of men and women and all these things we know about. But no, not a single one is that. It all has to do with the transcendent oneness and particularity of Baha'u'llah's station and the station of this revelation. You know, the cause is based, first thing in the Akdas, it says that the first duty of man is the recognition of the manifestation of God. Well, this word recognition is the same thing as in the short obligatory prayer to know thee and to worship thee. It's a kind of knowledge which is a spiritual awareness. We've been created to be spiritually aware of the manifestation of God, who is the mirror, the direct mirror in our whole inner being, intimately connected with us, which takes a lot of thinking about and moving towards, so that we find, as he tells us very strictly, thou art my lamp and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance. Well, what is this radiance? The radiance turns out to be the same as getting to know him and recognize him in those phrases from the Akdas and the obligatory prayer. Now, to not bypass the 9-year plan, but to tell us that there's no energy to prosecute and carry out and win the goals of that plan if we leave the Baha'i faith for the plan. This is not the point of it. It's our individual spiritual relationship with Baha'u'llah is the thing that animates us to be able to fulfill the goals. Otherwise, as sometimes you see, people burn out because they go and they go and they go and they like no satisfaction, or they just. House of Justice recently, the members of the teaching center were here, and Ken Bars told me that what they said was that the House of Justice is wanting us to realize that we're not building communities. We're building Baha'i communities. So we have to carry the process of the people forward to the point where they want to embrace Baha'u'llah. They run for the covenant of Baha'u'llah. They not kind of, avoiding it and not getting to it. Some people, okay, you'll chase them away if you're very direct. But otherwise, those are people of interest, that's fine. We need to bring them to a point of recognition of the manifestation. And sometimes that requires us to go back and take a careful look at what is our relationship with the manifestation. How much of our lives is involved in remembrance. There's another key phrase, beside this knowing God and recognizing God, a life of the remembrance of God where our time is taken up with constantly remembering Him and thinking of Him and invoking His name. And this is very much the spirituality, the ancient spirituality of Islam. And it comes very strongly through in the Baha'i faith. And you realize that Shoghi Effendi in Advent of Divine Justice, he says that we should make a careful study of the Quran. What's that? No. I don't suggest you do that before you do the Iqan. So get the Iqan in you first before you go to the Quran. But the Quran has so many wonderful things, and you see that our faith is the continuation of the spiritual part of that in its finest expression. And Baha'u'llah is busy teaching us how to approach Him, how to approach the manifestation, how to turn to that reality that also in the hidden words he says, turn within yourself that thou mayest find me standing within thee, mighty, powerful. What is this? Then he says in the hidden words, I have engraven upon thee my image. We know from Christianity, we're made in the image and likeness of God. Well, okay, that sounds nice, that's good. But what is it? And what is it? Are we falling way short of our potentiality to practice, if you will, the presence of God, to feel the closeness and the sweetness of the Blessed Beauty all the time, or whenever we turn to it? And how do we get the habit of turning? And how do we avoid that our obligatory prayers don't become rote, where, it's time for the noon prayer. That's it. We got to be very careful that we take something new. In Islam, there's a phrase that says, if every time you read a verse of God, it's not fresh and new, you're not a believer. Shock, what? So you cannot in any way exhaust the meanings and implications of the phrases of the obligatory prayer. And of course we're busy, and sometimes because we're busy we don't focus, we don't quite orient ourselves before we start the prayer. The whole idea of turning to Bachi, I think, is to remind us, So my impression over recent years is that as Baha'is we need to deepen ourselves a lot in this dynamics of the verses of God and in our relationship with the book of God. And the manifestation is called in the writings the living book. Elsewhere he's called the speaking book. It all starts there, and the whole thing comes out of his lips. Amazing reality. And he tells us we cannot go back to the essence. In fact, the manifestation of God declares himself that I don't know what God is. I can't penetrate into the reality of its essence. Have you seen? There's so many passages where he says that very directly. He finds himself endowed with a consciousness that penetrates and understands all of creation, because he's the sustainer and the upholder of creation. We live in a materialistic society that's turned all that on its head. So we kind of feel like we have the freedom to, I can believe what I want to believe, and I can invent my own religion. I don't need him. Yeah, good luck. He's still the maker. He's still the creator. In the Igan, there's a phrase he said that all things live, move, and have their being in the manifestation of God. When he says that he's standing within us, when he says he's closer to us than our life being, this is knitting those things together and becoming gradually aware of a blessed presence, and being able to put our trust in that presence is the source of human progress and human development. And boy, it's needed these days. When you're thinking, all the scary things that people are facing, I don't know, I can't imagine what it must be to be a non-Baha'i and not know about the revelation and facing this situation where you may die any time, or there may be the end of the world, or anyway, that is just the idea in the Quran, affirmed in the Surah Haikal of Baha'u'llah, the Surah of the Temple, that is the opening part of the, Promise of the Lord of Hosts, or whatever. Forgotten the name of the compilation that it's in. And they accuse Baha'u'llah of not having the fetra of a manifestation. The fetra is a very interesting word from Islam too. It's everybody has an endowment. And that is the blessings from God, the treasures that you will discover in the course of your trajectory through this world and the worlds to come, are all embedded in this fetra. I don't know, an example, we could say that consciousness is like the surface of a body of water. Our consciousness is like the surface of a body of water. The materialism and the events of the day agitate the surface so that the reflection of what's on high is never clear, because it's always being distorted by the world. If you can detach yourself from the concerns that fill our minds most of the time, petty concerns, but things we have to attend to. But if we can get to that tranquility of detachment sufficiently in our daily life, the surface calms down, and then the reflection is there in our consciousness. And also the reflection goes through the surface of the light, of the water, down to the depths, and it illuminates those jewels and gems that he's placed in our inner being. So we derive from the endowment he's given us. Usually fetra is translated endowment, the Arabic word. And then the blessings from on high illumine that. We can't see them generally without the presence of the light, glory, and splendor of the manifestation, the highest conceivable embodiment of which is Baha'u'llah. But obviously not the person of Baha'u'llah, although that's the vehicle. And that's the great, in the Igan, he said, that's the great thing keeps people from recognizing Baha'u'llah. There was a Baha'i in Kerman in the time of Baha'u'llah. He was a very solid believer, and he decided he hadn't thought of making a trip to Akka, but one time he decided, I think I should go to the Holy Land and see Baha'u'llah myself. So he eventually arranged it. He was permitted to come, and he came, and he was there in the presence of the pilgrims, and Baha'u'llah would visit them, and he'd speak with them, and he'd serve tea, and it all seemed terribly human to this believer. He got frightened that it was so human. Baha'u'llah was a person like him and like everybody else. Well, very special, yes, but the next day happened. The pilgrims were gathered, and one of the associates of helpers in the household came, and they said to him that Baha'u'llah would like you to go to his room and visit in his room. So he went there, came in, stood there, and Baha'u'llah didn't say anything. He just began glowing until he was a splendor that shook the whole room, and the man faints, dead on the floor. Thank you very much. They pulled him out, and he never wavered again. But the manifestation doesn't impose himself on people. They need to seek it out. But this man wanted really to see his reality. It's amazing. He would, in the process of revelation, the proofs of the manifestation are, first is that he exists, that there is such a being. And he has a twofold character. We see both in the Igon and in the various tablets and epistles, in the gleanings. There is the universal consciousness, reality of all the manifestations of God possess. That makes them manifestations of God. Then there's the individual, limited person of the manifestation, which has a date when he's born and when he dies and how he's persecuted and all the various things that happen. I'm going to switch position a little bit. I wanted to talk about, I had the distinct honor of traveling 3 months with the hand of the Qazi Nukulinga as his aide and translator and money changer and translator of all of his talks, because he didn't know any Spanish. And in the process of that, of course, we ate together and traveled together, and he told me so many interesting things. Not to make comparisons between the hands of the cause of God, but I have had the blessing of working in the institution in the Holy Land for 15 years with the hands, and meeting the various hands as they came and went, and I knew the hands in the field when I was pioneering there, come and visit. And Mr. Olinga had the most profound understanding, apparently, because the way he expressed it and the way he impressed on me, I couldn't see anything greater than that. Similar approaches of the other hands, because they all had a marvelous presence. Dr. Jakari just glowed in the dark. He was an extraordinary man. But Ina Kolinga, he was very, very special. I think that will be understood in the future as we go forward in the history of the faith. He said that when he went on pilgrimage, he had been pioneering already in the World Crusade. There were 3 Africans from Kampala that offered to pioneer, and the Nakshavanis drove them from Central Africa to West Africa and left 3 countries. And that was when Mr. Olinga went, and he became a pioneer in British Cameroon. Cameroon was dual, French Cameroon and British Cameroon. And in the course of the first year, he was engaged in teaching, and he was a superb teacher, and he brought 100 people into the faith. And the guardian's attention was attracted to that, and he gave him a title, Abu Futu, the father of victories. Oh. So he gets to go on pilgrimage, and he's not a hand of the cause yet. That was still coming later. But he came to the Holy Land, and the guardian, he came to the Western Pilgrim House, and they said, oh, the guardian said that you're to stay in the Eastern Pilgrim House, not in the Western Pilgrim House with the Americans and the Western English-speaking people, but in the Pilgrim. So, okay. And Lutfullah Hakim was assigned by Shoghi Effendi to take care of him and cook for him. And Lutfullah was elected to the first House of Justice, and he was the guardian's Arabic Persian secretary. So why did he put him up there all by himself? Because it was a custom of the guardian to go and accompany the Persian men to the shrines in the afternoons when they were there. He met with the Westerners for supper at the table, and they had this conversation, but with the Persians, he took them to the shrines and he chanted the visitation with them, and so now this is Mr. Olinga has been put in that position. He said that was such a blessing, because the guardian taught me so many things in those walks and in visits to shrine, and then he would say also, come to my house, come to the master's house in the morning. I want to speak with you some more. He really just molded this fellow.
How old was Mr. Olinga around this time? How old was Mr. Olinga?
Well, he's still fairly young, I think. I don't know. I have never thought of that. I should have thought of the age. I don't have to work it out. He was in his 20s when he went pioneering, and he was there. Must have been, 5 years or something, 3 years, and then went.
So maybe early 30s.
Early 30s, I should think that. He and Dr. Marger were the youngest hands. And both of them went early. Both. Mr. Olinga was assassinated in a political assassination. Nothing to do with the faith. The government was in strife with the other landowners and so on, and Mr. Olinga was a fairly wealthy family. And hitman was taking out whole families on the street where Mr. Olinga lived. Several had already been taken out, and his family was taken out, and then others afterwards. So it wasn't focused on him as a Baha'i. So he was curious. He said, and this brings us back to the subject of the manifestation again. He said, so what is a universal manifestation? Because we're told that Baha'u'llah is the universal manifestation for 500,000 years here. Okay, we don't have any scale of how to even place him in that in our heads, And he said, Shoghi Effendi said that there's no limit to the penetration and knowledge of the consciousness of the universal manifestation, because he's the reality of everything. But that beside that, he has an assignment and a mission that's given to him when he's born, when he's going to pass on or be martyred or whatever. And he said that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation, the universal manifestation for this planet. And for the first 4 stages that the different degrees that the souls pass through after they leave this world. But now we want to understand, and this is something we don't always, because we just maybe never ask ourselves. We go to the next world. What's the next world for us? The next world for us is the conglomeration of those souls that have lived on earth. And we go to the place where the most recent ones have passed on. So that's how we get to see our mother and our father, and not that you couldn't associate with them, but it makes it comfortable going to the next world because you have loved ones that you meet, and you meet the ones that taught you the faith, and it's your age group, so to speak. You know how that is. And what these 4 stages are, I don't know. And he didn't know, and he was curious himself. Say, what does it mean? You move from rank to rank, and in moving, God moves it from His bounty. He moves you to other ranks, and in each rank, your perception is higher than the lower ranks. And several times in Baha'u'llah's tablets, he says that you understand the souls. You see the souls. You understand those that are in a station at your level, and the ones under you, but you don't understand the upper ones. It's not that you don't associate with them and around them, you just can't, you don't have that degree of consciousness. There's degrees of consciousness that move from just plain dullard and completely occupied with worldly matters, gradually through the use of prayers and the verses of God, there's a leavening. You've got 2 angels that are constantly with you, prompting you about things that you've learned in the writings. This Islam confirms, and it's confirmed in the tablets of the Master as well. You're not alone. You're never alone. You're always being observed. But it is not suitable, they tell us, the writings tell us, for us to be aware of that. We think of it, remember that verse, and we think we've done it, but they're busy doing it. In fact, there's in the one of the Persian writings of the master of his talks in France, he said that you don't have anything. I mean, we have a kind of consciousness. He said it's empty, and the Holy Spirit provides you with the ability to think. Without a constant flow of the Holy Spirit, you can't think. But that the thinking comes into the vessel and takes on qualities of the vessel. So if you're a lowly person that is self-centered and selfish and carnal, the energy that the Holy Spirit provides for you to think gets changed and degraded by you, by me, not by you, but by me, by us, so to speak. Very interesting, huh? And so we have these 2 sides to our consciousness, one prompted by the teachings, if we've absorbed the teachings, if we're living in the blessed reality of properly reciting the obligatory prayers and taking the fast, that endows us with a terrific potentiality. Do we draw on it? That's the question. Meanwhile, we've got the manifestations of the whisperers of the thoughts of the evil one, which comes from our animal nature, and surges up in us, and we say, we want to do this, and we consult ourselves. Is this something I should do or not do? And the angels are quoting certain things at you, and you're thinking of that, and then you think, but the whisperings of the evil one are saying, that's no problem with that. Everybody does that. Don't get yourself in such a fight. You know, God's forgiving, merciful. Go ahead, do it. Plunge into the wrong part of the pond and get in trouble. Every day is like that. What do you say? Bring us to account every night. Remember that in the hidden words. Bring thyself to account every night, because ere long the reckoner will bring you to account for everything. Better if you can get it straightened out day by day. And maybe by thinking about it, or by reflecting on those things, you give up certain bad habits or There's a letter from the Guardian, I quoted it. It hasn't been published widely, but it's in the book Forces of Our Time, where Shoghi Effendi is quoted as saying from a letter that by by believing, by thinking and feeling negatively about another soul, you open yourself to the forces of darkness.
Say that again.
Can you say it again?
By thinking and feeling negatively about any other soul, you open yourself to the forces of darkness. There's a line in the Akdas, all in the same verse, that God forbids murder, adultery, and backbiting. God.
Not in that order.
Not in that order?
Not
Well,
necessarily.
backbiting is in the
I think it might be.
last position, but it's there. Now, what's commensurate about backbiting with these other things? He said that the delight of backbiting injures souls, and its effect lasts a century. I don't know. Abdu'l-Baha says, you're thinking bad about someone who has done something bad, and it's hidden, but you know about it. So you're feeling better about yourself because you didn't do that, he did it. But Abdu'l-Baha says, you don't know how his last breath is going to be, and you don't know how your last breath is going to be. You can't ever imagine that you're better than somebody else because you don't know the end result of it all. How many people that are alive with the Spirit, how many of these souls that Baha'u'llah addressed the tablets after the Akdas to? He says, O thou who I have named the name of God so-and-so. And then you look in the footnote, it says, after Baha'u'llah's passing, he broke the covenant. Bum, bum, bum. In fact, there's a whole institution of names of God that never made it through. So, this is the other thing to be the consciousness wanting to see the blessings and feel the radiance of the divine presence is the ultimate goal in consciousness. As it's raised. But nothing is steady, it comes and goes. And the tests he sends us are to increase our attention to that loving God, longing for God, and it ends up being loving Baha'u'llah and attaining Baha'u'llah's presence and thinking about him. If we do move even small steps in that direction, the plan will go along fine. You'll see it be much better. I don't know. These are, friends, are my private thoughts. So if any of them help this, I'll be grateful. But they're all, as far as I understand, coming from this source of writings that we all have. Except what the Guardian told Mr. Olinga, which I will now tell you a little about. Now he's heard from the Guardian that Baha'u'llah is taking care of the souls after they die. Here, he's caring for them here on this planet. And after they die, in those first 4 stages, he's guiding and encouraging. After that, they go on to association with much higher souls and different. It said he didn't speak about that at all. What does that mean? He said what Shoghi Effendi told him, that this is the last, this revelation is very great and has terrific potential for what's going to happen in the world. But at the moment, we're in the lowest ebb that the earth has ever been. There's no recorded history worse than this. We actually have great portions of humanity that don't believe in God. Okay. It sounds normal these days. You kind of have to be careful. You tell people believe in God, you watch what you're saying. It's totally on its head and totally backward. And Shoghi Effendi, Mr. Linga said, told him that he'd heard several times the master say, this is the hell of the planets of this solar system. This is the backward one. And that now that we're coming to the oneness and recognition of the oneness and wholeness of the human race, where we're all blended into one race, we'll all be one part of the reflection of the oneness of God by being the oneness of the whole human race and identifying with these very teachings that we're talking about. To think that it's going to be that the most great peace means we'll all have better cars and better houses. I mean, come on. That thing's dragging us down. All these having them, but being attached to them is a problem. Then he said that after the stage of, first we have family unity, tribal unity, city-state, national unity, and now we have the oneness of the world. The earth, one country, mankind its citizens. Declaration. It's a terrific, world-shaking verse. It sounds so pretty and nice, but when you think about it, it means the complete uprooting of all human governments and the reblending of the human race, and in a way, some of which is happening right in front of our eyes. We look at migration as from one point of view, yes, it's very disturbing politically to this and that. Why should it happen? It shouldn't happen. But on the other hand, the great blending of humanity, God does it through these kind of things. Look how would we ever have the Vietnamese population in this country that we have, except through the war, and the Korean one, and and then the second, third generation is already crossed and can't remember the language and identifies with melting pot. So he says that after this consummation, after humanity gets itself together and forms one planet, he said, then it's ready for the next stage, which is not a stage of this planet, but connecting with another planet. And then he said we'll need a manifestation to give us laws for the relationship between our planet and that other planet, of which he said there are a number of them that far, far advanced above us. Let me emphasize here that this is a pilgrim note. These are pilgrim notes that I'm telling you. I have done my best after Mr. Linga told me that, and when I've come away from the Holy Land, to find if any other pilgrims heard these things. And I found two very reliable sets of notes that talk about this. And they don't stop there. The Guardian said, but after the universal manifestation at the end of this cycle comes and unites spiritually all the planets of our system, the next stage will be interstellar connections. But unless humanity conforms to the laws of the love of God in a much deeper way than it has now, they won't be discovered. So there'll be some kind of, quick interaction between stars and people. And then, we have stellar, or the uniting of two solar systems. Then that spreads to other solar systems. And that finally, the whole galaxy becomes spiritualized. Meanwhile, we're not getting older because we're eternal beings. In some way, we'll be participating. He said, then the Guardian said, and after the galactic unities come cosmic unities, and etc. And then the pilgrims, both of them, say that he was staring up at the ceiling, he was just in another realm by himself, and he said that then parallel to this, those unifications will be taking place in the spiritual realms as well. Mm-hmm. Think of something that we read all the time, but what do we make of it? He said, Baha'u'llah says, I've come to unite all who are in the heavens and on the earth. From the night journey of Muhammad, the account of the night journey of Muhammad, he's ascended through 7 heavens, and he talks about a prophet sitting on the throne of each of those as he goes through those heavens, he sees the prophet and all of his followers in that heaven. Talks about Christ in the fourth heaven, in the Yugon. That's actually quoted in the Yugon. All those beings are there. So that's Christ, fourth, fifth, Muhammad himself, sixth, the Bab, seventh heaven, the highest heaven, Baha'u'llah. And where Muhammad approaches the Lot tree, beyond which there is no passing, hears the voice between 90,000 veils of light, which Baha'u'llah says very clearly in his tablets, that was my voice. I was speaking to him. In fact, you said in the obligatory prayer even, just to give us some idea where the whole thing is going. It's got organization, it's got vision, it's eternity, and if we follow in the right footsteps, we'll be involved in it and helping it and so on. But if we don't develop ourselves, if we don't apply ourselves to this spiritual growth, individual spiritual growth and consciousness, we'll enter the next world. Well, not you because you're believers who've recognized the manifestation, but in general, the people will be like the level of earth rather than the level of humanity. There will be continuity of existence for such souls, but not eternal life. But then they're eternal, but not eternal life, which eternal life is the reborn condition. The Christ consciousness he's made that the very center of his faith, but it's kind of rewritten, as you will all know from your own experiences. So it isn't, he says, you have to be born again. And that birth is described by Baha'u'llah in the passage about the true seeker in the Yugon. You want to look at those prerequisites to recognize and be attracted and then become ignited. The fire of the love of God carries us into this condition of remembrance, pulsing remembrance of God. What does it say about remembrance? The healer of all thine ills is remembrance of me. This is supposed to be, as I understand it, a normal, conscious stage of our lives. We've sacrificed a lot if we bypass it in any way. Sorry, it's a very serious subject. No, I stick my neck out by saying anything on the subject because I don't follow it myself properly, but that much I wanted to share anyhow with you because I don't know where else you'll hear it these days.
Yeah. We appreciate you sharing.
Marsha's cheering for us all to get us, keeps us going. Yeah, she Chase from, he's in Africa now. He says he feels Marsha helping him all the time. Well,
I have a question for you.
I said too much now. Your turn.
Can I pose a question to you and get your thoughts on it?
Sure.
So,
I don't know if I can answer, but you can ask.
We live in a time where, and you've spoken to this, but where so many feel that they can have a relationship with God without the manifestation. Some of you are interested in spirituality in the world, but don't want to do it in the name of religion because of what they feel religion is. So I work in that, like many of us probably, spend so much time with people who are yearning for spiritual sustenance, but turn their head when it comes to a named religion, and feel like, well, and using terms like God is within me, God is within everywhere, I can find God everywhere, and wonderful, don't disagree with that to an extent. And that's always something to navigate. Do you have any thoughts or words of how we handle that? Wisdom that we can give others or even ourselves navigating that?
Yeah. You wonder how much of that is actual real consciousness and how much of it is lingos and phrases that make you feel good because they just make you feel good. God's always with me, and yeah. Pretty serious, the question of hearing about the manifestation and not reacting. Baha'u'llah says if they hesitate less than the blink of an eye, it's a transgression. When they hear about if they just by hearing the name of Baha'u'llah, that is built into the human reality. If it's so buried down that they can't react to it properly, it's a pity, really. That's why Shoghi Effendi tells us we should pray in the mornings to meet waiting souls. 2% of humanity, he suggested, is ready to hear about the faith. And sometimes we run across them and they're people that we've known already, and they start getting on our case when you tell them, you say, why didn't you tell me about this before? What are you sitting on this for? But that doesn't happen very often, but that's what they feel. It's like, I always believe this is what I believe, that's what I'm waiting for. Okay. Abdu'l-Baha says there's 3 kinds of souls, 3 levels of receptivity, he suggests, in a tablet. It's buried in Baha'i World Faith, that old volume of tablets in one of the latter chapters. He says, some souls are like oil. It only takes a spark and the whole thing flames up. Some are like green branches. You put them over the fire and they sputter and they smoke and they pop. And the third one he said are like rocks. Like rocks. Stones. You bring them close and you can warm them up, but as soon as you move away, they cool off again. Just like the green branch ones. Snap, crackle, and pop. No, yeah. I think this question is very serious. We should, if you can use your time and the confirmations that you have to address people that are waiting souls. Bill Sears used to talk about this a lot with the friends, because there's several letters to the Guardian about this, remembering that at dawn asking Baha'u'llah, please guide you. Marilyn and I have a few people in the world that write us all the time. One miracle after another, you know. One becomes an Uber driver because God puts people in the Uber all the time that need to hear about the faith. He keeps a stack of books in the front seat. Not everybody, but a lot of them, and sometimes exceptional things. One wrote us and told us a girl got in the car in the morning, and we're driving along, and I mentioned the faith, and she heard, Bahai, are you a Bahai? She said, my father was a Bahai. And this morning, after years, I took out a box with his papers and books in it and looking at it and thinking, what should I do with this? And now you say you're a Baha'i. What should I do with it? I mean, that kind of too big a coincidence, you know.
Yeah.
On another, he's Caucasian, he says, almost everybody I talk about the faith, I go to the African American part of the city and people get in it, and then I get invited to their homes and tell their families, and oh, it's no trouble for Baha'u'llah if we're attentive. So Bilzer says, you know, you pray to meet the waiting souls, and then he adds on that you better pray that you recognize them when you meet them. You know, come in. Oh, he's not going to be interested, or she's not going to be. What the heck? Again, putting our trust in him. And the divine plan, in one part, says that Abdu'l-Baha says, arise and go forward. And in order to effect a change in people, you need to become incarnate light. Divine plan, first thing he says about the qualities of the teachers. Become incarnate light. Good gracious. We have the potential. Thou art my lamp, my light is in thee, get thou from it thy radiance. Charge him. Beg him, help me understand this. Help me to understand that in relation to me and what I need to be doing. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Helpful.
Gives you something to do anyway. But you're probably already doing it.
Mr. Dunbar, how old were you when you heard of the faith?
I was 17, just the week before I was 18.
Would you identify yourself as a stone or stick, or
Oh, what?
would you identify yourself as the stone or the stick or the what was the first one? The oil.
No, I don't know. I think I was the oil. Yeah, because I had a big heavy vision, right? A week before I heard of the faith. Because I'd been begging, if there's any power, consciousness higher than this one I have, which doesn't seem to be very useful, please let me know. Just let me know. That's all. I just want to know that you're there. And I had that happen. And then within 5 days, I heard of the faith and met the first Baha'is. And, well, I had known a couple of Baha'is, but I didn't realize they were Baha'is. And went to the Willow's fireside. That was in 56, probably end of January 56.
Every Friday night.
Yeah.
For decades.
Hmm?
For decades.
Yeah.
Every Friday night.
Yeah. And Virginia Foster was a speaker that night, and when she spoke, I was attracted to what she was saying, but also during that, this confirmatory spirit that I'd felt the week before came back. And I immediately knew this is the faith that I asked, how do you become a Baha'i? To Lois at the door. She looked at me like, are you high on drugs? We just got here. You better find out what it is first. She said, okay. Those days it was pretty serious to find out what it was. You didn't get into the faith very easily, you know. She says, so I realized that's the wrong question. I asked, how do you become Baha'i? I said, no, I'm saying, how do people become Baha'is? She said, oh, okay. She said, they go to study classes and they have to read the New Era, the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha, and be ready to respond to questions by the local assembly when they interview you to see whether you're worthy to be a Baha'i.
Wow. Was it really worthy, the word they used? Prepared. Worthy.
I understood
It's a big
it
difference.
as it might not be accepted.
That's a fun question.
Yeah, no, it would have to be stated the right way, but
Yes.
it was kind of like that. They just, when I contacted
I
the,
could hear Lois saying that to somebody though. I could hear Lois saying that.
so there were about 6 of us all decided we wanted to be Baha'is, and we all wrote letters to the LSA of Los Angeles. 5 of the 6 got letters back, appointments, and became Baha'is. Mine was never answered. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the LSA. They said, "We received your letter, but you have addressed yourself to the wrong party because you're a part of a JD district inside Los Angeles, which has its own assembly, and you'll have to write them." That was a relief, because I was wondering why. So I went to the secretary of the assembly and spoke to her through an opening in the door. She never did open the door. And I said, yeah, so I felt that maybe, this is annoying to her and so on. I said, can you just call up to LA and have them take me in there, because that's where my friends have become. She says, "Young man, this is not a social club. You better go home and think about this."
What neighborhood was this?
LA.
No,
No.
the neighborhood, because JD is over here too.
Yeah.
Was it over here, View Park?
No, it was West Hollywood. Anyway, I said, "Well, look, I really want to go ahead with this." She said, "Well, have you read anything?" And I said, "Yes, I've been reading and studying and so on." Did you do it with anybody? I said, "Yes, the whole process was with Virginia Foster." Oh! Virginia Foster? Boy, I could feel her boiling inside, like this guy's gonna tell her what I've just said, and it's not gonna go well. So she got more cooperative then, and she said, "Well, the assembly would have to meet in order for you to come in." I said, "Yeah, I understood that." But she says, "Everybody's busy. We haven't met for 9 months."
Oh, wow.
And I don't know how they're going to feel about meeting. Oddly enough, after the meeting where they finally brought me into the faith, after standing out in the cold for 40 minutes while they decided.
On the street.
Yeah. So I thought they're having trouble deciding whether I can be a Baha'i or not. But it wasn't that they decided that quickly, but they hadn't done any business for 9 months. So
Wow.
they're trying to finish a few little things before I came in and shared the closing prayer with him. But that was all right when I got in, and I realized what had happened. But boy, those 40 minutes were tough.
Wow. It's changed a lot.
And at the end of the meeting, one of the older guys who had been annoyed, when I got there, he came, the first member of the assembly that came to the house, and he said, "What is this? You don't know what this is about? It's a damn nuisance." He said, "I had a dinner engagement." I thought, wow, he's not in a good mood to vote yes. Oh, yeah. So at the end of the meeting, he congratulated me, and along with the others, and he said, "I hope you don't turn out like the young man we brought in last year." Okay. One of the great regrets of my life is that I never asked who was that. Where does he live, and nothing more.
Don't reel him in.
Commiserate with him, yeah.
I can see why you were such in a hurry to leave the country and go to Costa Rica.
No, but that took a little while. It took 2 years to do that.
Only 2 years.
Only 2 years.
I have a
This same guy was sorry.
Was this the same procedure that happened in other parts of the world?
It was going on, yeah, it was. I know San Francisco was like that, and
No, I don't mean in the United States. Like when you went pioneering, did you see those kinds of procedures happening to
Believers.
usher people into the community?
those 2 years, yeah, Central America, they didn't know a lot about what was going on. I was in Nicaragua, and I had a meeting with a few other friends, and they said that we're so happy you're here and you're going to be on the LSA as of tonight. Without an election, because we have 3 members that are spiritual realities in the other world, and they're not really here anymore on the assembly, but we're trying to keep the assembly. We keep their names here, but we can take one off and put you on.
Wow.
It was a little different, yeah. And after they said that, the transformer on the corner of the block blew up. Huge explosion. Have you violated Baha'i principles? What's going on? This huge explosion, we were all in the dark for the rest of the evening with a candle. And that was Managua, Nicaragua, which that time of year remained hot all night, all day and all night. Goodness gracious, it was warm.
What, was there just paranoia back then, or why was it so intense?
Trying to fulfill the Guardian's prerequisites for who can be considered a believer, and just a certain, in the American Baha'i community, there was a certain formality about it. And the assemblies had to meet the people. And probably it was good at the early days, of so few Baha'is that they know what they're doing. Because the Guardian had said it wasn't fair to bring people into the faith that didn't know that it was a religion and there was a new founder and there were. And I had a good grounding before, reading those things with Virginia Foster and so on. I didn't know the birth date of Mullah Hossein. I realized afterwards.
You missed one on the test.
Mr. Dunbar, can I share that when I turned 15 and I was living in Haifa, and I declared or became a Baha'i, I had the great blessing of being welcomed into the chambers with you and the other members of the House of Justice. And you much more kindly invited me into sort of my spiritual maturity. And I have never forgotten that you said, it's not so much a declaration of your faith, but a confirmation of who you have been. And it was so exciting and so special.
The House of Justice brought you into the faith, yeah. No local assembly, so.
No pressure. And then when we left Haifa, so I went to high school in Haifa. My father was an architect, had the great privilege and honor of working on the art projects and other in the finance department. And when we left, we had a meeting with the Universal House of Justice in their chambers again. And I will also never forget that actually me and my mom and my sister, all of us, that we just cried and cried and cried and cried. And we were not ready to leave, and it was so emotional and so loving too, and that experience of being in that room with you all. And that afterwards we saw you downstairs in the cafeteria, and you said, we had to bring a mop in after you. And it's such a sweet memory that I've always carried.
Please.
My heart and my mind are just tingling from everything that you've shared tonight. And one of the things that you just said that you shared with Mona is that it's not a declaration of per se, but it's more of a what? Confirmation of who you've been. And I'm wondering if, you know, when you said something about, my understanding of what you said was like, when we graduate from this earth and we go to the next world, that in my heart, my dream is that everyone finds their way to the frequency, the energy, the power of Baha'u'llah. Is that the design of everyone on the earth? Because his revelation is for everyone. Kelsey and I talk about this. You know, you told me once, you were like, Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for this day. It's the revelation encompasses the whole planet. So is the design that everyone realizes the deep confirmation of who they've always been? Or is the design that some do and some don't? I know that maybe some will and some won't, but do you know, or is there anything in the writings that have said like what the design of it is? Is the design that like, yeah, every single soul in their own way is to know and love God and to be aligned with the manifestation of God for the day?
That's the same thing.
Is it possible that is that everyone's birthright? Is that everyone's design? Is that
Of
everyone's
course.
every person, every being?
And everyone, Baha'u'llah says, has the capacity to attain it.
Yeah.
How could God judge you, pass judgment on your quality and your faith if you hadn't recognized, for example? You had the capacity to recognize, but you didn't recognize. Well, but he says, if you haven't heard, to the pilgrims, he said, you know, if people haven't heard of the faith, when they go to the next world, they will have the opportunity to recognize the light. There's that early stage, and you see this repeated over and over in the near-death experience people. You go to the light, you feel the light, and so on. It's all mercy, and if you haven't recognized it, you can recognize it. But whether you will is still like in this world.
Mm-hmm.
If you had much, depending on, you know, if you're wed to darkness, you're not going to feel comfortable in the light. You do it first, but settling down, like seeks like and the company of its kind, hidden words. So the societies of heaven and the groups and different levels of consciousness and interaction are dependent on what you're like. That's at least that's the way I'm understanding it at the moment. And if they haven't recognized, if they've heard of Baha'u'llah, that's very difficult. Sheikh Effendi says their life is almost useless if they haven't recognized having heard. But he also talks about Baha'is who are lukewarm Baha'is. They didn't have the assembly treatment we had. So, you know, there's that. And he said it's a problem. If you get too many lukewarm Baha'is, then they all elect their friends to the assembly, and the whole dynamic of seeing who is the most suitable spiritually to be on the assembly gets lost. So we're going to, again, this is the reason we want to ground the believers and ourselves in the spiritual vision of what the heck we're here for, you know?
Hooper.
Yeah. Please, yes.
I'm a new Baha'i. I gained membership in November. I would say my whole journey of life, I've been searching. I had a very harsh relationship with parents and grandparents. So most of my life, I depended on God for answers to many things, obstacles as they come up. Now that I'm in the faith, I have been going through series of extreme opposition, and I'm now learning principles that spiritually protect me as I go through these obstacles or challenges. And I like how you spoke earlier on almost like the voices of the world, because it's very different from spiritual guided principles that protect us in the world.
Yeah.
So it's a very profound journey.
So glad that you found your way. And I hope what I said helped and not, was not too astonishing, because
It helped a lot. It connected many dots, because sometimes I feel challenged because I want to walk, I guess, a more strict path, and then I have friends that are in the world and like, oh, you're too hard on yourself, or oh, it's not that serious, or you can, and it always leads me to explosions, to say the least. And it's a little hard because my family doesn't have spiritual guidance, so even having connection with them, sometimes I'm misunderstood or misguided.
you've seen the prayers for praying for one's parents and so on. There's several.
Mm.
And that's important to continue to pray. It's difficult, yeah. Mm. Please.
I'm really new Baha'i too. It's been about a year and a half since I declared. Prior to that, I was Muslim. What attracted me about the Baha'i faith was the number 19. Because I don't know if you're familiar with Rashad Khalifa's translation of the Quran. So that's what I was studying for like 20-something years. And like I said, the 19 attracted me, so I investigated the Baha'i faith and read the Kitabi Khan, and I noticed there are a lot of Quranic verses referred to in it. And right now I'm reading so much, so I'm trying to absorb and just learn as much as I can. And I don't know if it's Baha'u'llah or Abdul-Baha, they talk about the importance of studying the Quran, Baha'i studying the Quran. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Just how important it is for our development? Fully it's, Baha'is.
There's a whole lot of things to study, but the Quran is definitely on the list and amazing. And a letter as early as the Advent, Shoghi Effendi doesn't pass it by, but talks about it and said the only authentic scripture in the world outside of the Baha'i revelation is the verses of the Quran. And so the importance of recognizing that, studying it. And he says you cannot really understand Baha'u'llah without a knowledge of the teachings of Islam. It enhances our understanding by learning about the life of the apostle, of the prophet. And
a lot of things you talked about too, the 7 universes and our development, our growth, like what we do here on earth develops our souls to the degree that we'll be stratified in heaven.
Yeah.
And there's a lower heaven and a higher heaven. I think you kind of described it. And what you were saying is kind of described it. And, when you were talking about the universal and the cosmic, and it was like, oh, that's even more. Because like you said, there's all these universes and parallel places that exist.
Yeah. It's just to break us out of any cocoon that we think it's just here. We'll be with our friends here, there, and that's the end of it. It's a big deal. Lovely. Mr. Arlinga, he had various ways of, his character is very loving and close with the youth, and so many little huddles we had where he'd talk about these very spiritual things. But then he'd give public meetings. In the public meetings, he had a very dignified stance and he spoke very formally and full of truth, but was, you know, people say, is he king? And people would ask me. We got off the bus in Quinandé, a place in Ecuador, and half the population was black, but we got off, and so it wasn't because he was black, but all kinds of little kids of mixed, all backgrounds came rushing towards him. And he had 10 on each hand, more or less. And he was just like a magnet, you know. They didn't know who he was, but they knew who he was. And then he started walking in front of the bus to get out of the way of the door so the other people could get off the bus. And started down the center of this street, and the traffic stopped. And other people came out and followed. I was with him, and about 200 people gathered behind us and walked down the full length of the center road of Quinandé, and he waved to the people in the buildings. And, you know, it just, somebody had arrived, the likes of which they'd never seen before. And he had. That night, 40 people became Baha'is in a meeting.
I love that you shared with us this idea of we're building Baha'i communities and not just communities. That you shared with us the idea that we are building Baha'i communities and not just communities. It's a tough one for me to wrap my head around fully because we know that we're doing so much work in our neighborhoods that are building community and not necessarily Baha'i community. So that's something that's interesting for me to wrap my head around. But also, it does make me think of how important it is to build Baha'i communities specifically. And just a quick story I'll share is one of my trips in, I shared with maybe some of you, but when I was in Ghana, one of my trips there, I happened to be there during a huge celebration of the Baha'is there because there was one of their own would go to Togo back and forth for work. And while he was there, amongst others, there was some terrible murder that happened amongst some friends in Togo. He was arrested, this Baha'i kid, about 17, 18 years old. He was arrested and then being held for these crimes, of which he didn't commit, but he was the one identified. And while he was being held, then they put him on the stand to testify. And when they had him testify, they had him swear on the Bible to tell the truth. And he had said, I can swear on the Bible, but it won't mean the same to me as it does you, because I'm a Christian. And they said, okay, well, you can swear on the Quran. He says, well, I can swear on the Quran, but it won't be the same, such. And the judge asked him what was his faith. And he said he was a Baha'i. And the judge said, you're a follower of Baha'u'llah. You're a Baha'i. He said, yeah. And he says, what's his son's name? And he says, Abdullah. Ask him some facts. And the judge says, my son is a Baha'i. And I know the work that he does in the community and what they stand for. And if you're a Baha'i, which is why I asked you questions, there's no way that you could have committed these crimes and you're free to go. So this guy had come back to Ghana and they were celebrating the fact that this individual, and his words were how grateful he was to the judge's son for living the life that allowed his father to see the good of the Baha'i faith. He represented the faith so well that this man would let him go.
That's a lovely story.
And that was so moving, but it made me think of like, and there's other stories. Like one time I was in a bank and I was trying to deal with Naime Teddy's bank, and this is years ago, I was trying to cash this check and she wasn't being that friendly. But when she saw the check and she saw Naime and Teddy's name, she was like, oh, you know Naime and Teddy? Just randomly, story to me, and I was like, yeah, I'm her brother. She was like, oh my gosh, I love them. And then it became easy after that. And I thought they didn't really know Naime and Teddy, but the way that they had interacted with this teller had some impact. So those are like just some reflections I think about how important it is to live the life and represent the faith of Baha'u'llah. So even in our neighborhoods, yeah, we're doing a community, but we are doing a Baha'i community. There's importance to that. It's not just making life a little bit better. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around that idea, as you said.
Even if it doesn't change what we're doing right now, but it changes something inside of us when we think, you know, we have to be moving these people towards the faith. Seems so obvious, but we get taken up with, you know, the goal of social action and things of that sort, and all of which is good and important, but I think it's also supposed to be the means of attracting the souls to recognize the center of where that truth is coming from, you know.
Yes.
I remember when you came to visit our neighborhood and you talked about the importance of every person you meet needs to hear that word Baha'u'llah. Some kind of way you have to get that in. Every person that we meet and encounter.
Yeah.
And you don't wait or hesitate because you may never have that opportunity again.
Yeah.
And so it makes me think of, what did I say the other day, Teddy? We're chicken. No, what did I say? We're scaredy cats. We're scared.
We're scared.
We're scary, yeah. We're so afraid to let people know who we are, and say and tell them about Baha'u'llah in this day and age right now. And so, what are your reflections on that? Like,
I remember two things. One, when I was a new Baha'i, they told me that the master said that if you're going to see the person only once, deliver the message. One way or another, if you can. And then he said, but if you're going to see them over and over again, because they just moved into the flat next door, then live the life. Demonstrate Baha'i love and gradually, because maybe too much if you're, but otherwise, mention the name. It's great. They always worry about that on flights in the States. The flight sitting next to this other guy, and he sat down and he put his earphones in and turned on his music, and I don't know. There was no way to distract him. So finally, we were landing in some obscure place in the Midwest. He took the things off to get up to go out to the plane. I said, excuse me, he said, do you know the Baha'is here in Des Moines or where it was? The who? The what? The followers of Allah. I'm trying to locate them. I thought maybe you might have heard of them. You really haven't heard of them? You better find out who they are. Because
I love it. It's honest,
because
actually.
you're probably never going to see them again.
And also, it's honest. You are probably looking for the Baha'is wherever you're going.
yeah.
It's just the truth.
John Angelo used to approach people and say, excuse me, are you a Baha'i? And yeah, just like you said, no, what is a Baha'i? He says, oh, you don't know? And we start telling them. He says, I used to do this until one day I went up to someone and said, yes, I am. How did you know? He says, it's so apparent. Your radiance just, I can tell.
I think your grandmother used to do that. You know, are you a Baha'i? Oh, something about you. And then she'd start talking about, but, you know, they had firesides every week in her house. And so all during the week they were meeting people and inviting to fireside in the living room would be full of people every Wednesday night. And the same with Tatiana's grandmother too. Everywhere they went, every day. It was amazing.
Those two.
No, it's wonderful that it can do that.
Aside from delivering the name Baha'u'llah, what would you say are like some key things if you have the one meeting with someone to translate about the Baha'i faith? Because when you know someone, you can kind of tailor it to what you think they're most receptive to. But if you're just doing that one meeting,
Well, I think the extreme case is like you've heard that, and you get on the subway and you're
right.
standing next to, it's crowded and the face is right there, but how do I say Baha'u'llah's name to them? That's the challenge. Just start first, I think use the greatest name inside to see if... Okay, it's a challenge. That is a challenge though. When very short, standing on the bus stop or something in the line.
Don't worry, Mr. Dunbar. She's a fearless teacher.
Fearless.
Yeah, she won't hesitate.
Well, it's because when I learned about it, I was the person, the oil that was like, how has no one told me? And then I found out my babysitter growing up was a Baha'i, the contractor working in my parents' house was a Baha'i, one of my best friends from high school had moved to London and become a Baha'i. There were Baha'is all around me, and I was like, how did not one person mention this? So I took it upon me. I was like, you know what? Everyone I meet is going to hear about this because I'm going to be the person I wish I had. And I think because not everyone knows what the faith is, it actually introduces like a beautiful teaching opportunity because there usually isn't bias you're working against. You really have a clean slate. So it is, in what I've found, I haven't received any pushback.
In one letter of the Guardian, he implies that the name Baha'i or Baha'u'llah is like a seed, and it goes in and it matures. There's Frances Worthington. She's written this a book on basic Baha'i teachings. She lives in North Carolina, and she was in the Holy Land visiting for a while. And she said her experience is that people who hear about the faith, they don't forget. And something now, they're in a process, and the name will come up again. Like they've heard of the Baha'i teachings from some neighbor or something. And the next time they're reading in the newspaper and they read about persecution of Baha'is in Iran, and it clicks together. And the next time she finds out that her cousin Peggy is a Baha'i. And by that time she wants to know what is this thing? I better find out what it is. But sometimes you can shame the people if they've never heard of it. You really never heard of the Baha'i faith? It's a worldwide religion,
It's just the truth.
That's how it happened for me. I had to write a paper in school. We were studying all the religions, and then Baha'is came up and wrote a paper on it. And instantly, when I was going through the facts of Baha'is, it just touched my heart. It's like, yeah, this is the one for me. And then I kind of went to the back of my mind, and then I post a lot of like philosophy on my Facebook, and then eventually a Baha'i conversation came up, and I would drive back and forth to school right past the Baha'i Center on the way, and I would always look at it, and I'm like, I don't know when to go, how to go, but it's interesting. I was just connecting them, and then when the meaningful conversation came up on my Facebook timeline, I reserved to go to a conversation. And then when I sat in my first conversation, it's like this warming I never felt. And I knew I made it there. But it started like that. It was just like, first it was just planted there, and then it kept coming back up.
Nice.
You shared a story similar to this, but during the pandemic, Tatiana used to do her dance classes on Zoom. And she would sit, then after the dance class, she would sit with the attendees and invite anybody who wanted to stay and just kind of create fellowship. So she would sit in the corner with her little Zoom windows and having conversation with women that just attended her dance class. And in one of these breakdown sessions, she mentioned something about Baha'i. One of her attendees reached out to her and was like, "Hey, are you a Baha'i?" And she says, "Yes." She says, "My grandmother was a Baha'i." She says, "I really cherish growing up with Baha'i prayers and the stories, and I really, really want that for my children." Now she has 2 children of her own. She's lived her whole life, adult life, never really connected with the Baha'is or anything. Yeah, she's now. People in this room know her. That she comes around and she brings her kids to things, and it was just through that mentioning of the name.
I have a question. Oh, is there someone else who had a question first? On this topic, I'm curious what you know about the actual effect of the name Baha'u'llah, vibrationally or mysteriously, mystically, I should say, what it offers when we share the name. If you have any insight into that.
I think it's a mystery, yeah. But we know that it's affirmed that it has deep effects on people, and we don't know how it happens, how it grows. But to have the remembrance of God is to have Baha'u'llah's name on our lips all the time. To be repeating the greatest name, and there's a quiet pulse in our being, But it's all different levels of expression that it produces. I think it's hard to define it. The remembrance is, the prayer is so interesting. The prayer is, "I implore thee, O my God, by thy name." How many times the prayer is open that way? Who is thy name? What is thy name? And then you find, out of the 200, maybe there's 5 of them that say, "I implore thee by thy name," or by he who is thy name. He who is thy name. It's always Baha'u'llah. We pray to Baha'u'llah. The prayer is from Baha'u'llah. The whole thing is from Baha'u'llah, but he modestly just has us say thy name, but we should remember what is the name we're talking about? The name of God, the greatest name of God, the greatest name of God. We're implored. So what the implications of that? Why he has us repeat it 95 times a day? Have you heard of that law? Okay, welcome. He has us, says to recite once in a day when you're in a mood where you can address him. Wash your hands and your face and turn to Haifa, turn to Baji, and repeat Allah 95 times. Now, that's very mysterious in itself, How many years we do that, and sometimes don't know why we're doing it, but it's a law, and I try to fulfill it. One of the hands of the gods told me that if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and you have 5 fingers on the other hand, 1 set of 19, 2 sets of 19, 3 sets of 19, 4 sets of 19, 5 sets of 19, 95. So you can use your hands to do it, but some people, they like having a prayer beads, 95 prayer beads, so you go bead by bead, Allah, so you don't have to count them. don't have to remember the count of it, which is, I think, a distraction, you know. And you want to be recalling the meaning that God is all glorious. That's what you're saying. But it's in the Arabic because the Arabic is the revelation, is the revealed form of it. And that has a special power.
And now there's an app for it too.
Now there's a phone now.
Oh,
Did you say Dawn?
Will you tap it or something?
Just tap it.
So,
And then
oh,
you'll have to
95. Touch it. Oh, okay. Hello.
Allah.
When you get to 95, it stops. So you know you've gotten there.
Okay.
But I didn't have my phone today, so I did that.
But you have to go tap.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe you can prostrate yourself and just use your forehead.
There you go. With your nose, maybe. That's interesting. If you hold on it, does it go?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Tap.
You have to actually tap it. It's to 95. Just vibrate it.
You always have little gems in Arabic words and their meanings and stuff. You mentioned one earlier from the short Planetary prayer. I always appreciate your insight into the Arabic and the translations.
The translation shows the Guardian's translation we've got. That's a terrific thing.
But you put a lot of effort into studying that.
Yeah, so there's a website called Utterance. Have you seen that?
Utterance Project.
Oh, yes.
So that has it in English, and the chanted it, and it has it in Arabic, and transliterated into English letters as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that you could actually learn Arabic for the short prayer or something.
My favorite is when you broke down the justice in Arabic.
Yeah, that's an important thing. It's referring to the hidden word that says the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. And the word for justice there is not the word justice in the house of justice. You know, Beitul Ad is the justice of the house of justice, and it's the justice that's the opposite of mercy. Those two play on each other. But the word in the hidden word is insaf. And insaf it means justice too, but it means it in another sense. And if you start looking at alternatives, you come up with fair-mindedness, balanced thinking, holding to truth. With it thou shalt know of thine own knowledge and not the knowledge of thy neighbor.
Very different than
When
justice.
the two words are together sometimes, then Chogyamuni will translate it justice and equity.
Yeah.
It's closely aligned to equity, but it is this broader sound of mind, being sound of mind, and being able to think on your own, not because of what everybody else thinks. And it's really part of the foundation of the independent search after truth. You know, it comes right into that.
Mm-hmm.